I don't need old men slowing us down, she said, snapping her laptop shut with a cold smirk. Her eyes didn't blink as she handed me the termination notice, like it was just another box she checked off before ordering her morning smoothie at the office. I didn't say a word. I stood up, looked straight at that smug figure one last time, then turned and walked out. No arguments, no sighs. The last thing I glanced at was the nameplate on the door, Vice President of Operations, before stepping into the freezing hallway. The younger employees in the room looked at me like they'd just witnessed a machine being dismantled. I had trained every single one of them, step by step, over the years. Now they kept their heads down, fingers still tapping on keyboards, avoiding my eyes like they were dodging the truth itself. My name is Thomas Reed. I am 58 years old and had been with Landon Manufacturing in Columbus, Ohio for 21 years. That place used to be the heart of the region's machinery industry. When I started, it was still a greasy, noisy shop reeking of steel and motor oil. I came in with a 2-year tech degree and calloused hands after an auto plant in Detroit suddenly shut down. I thought it was the end. Turned out it was just the beginning. My former boss, Alan Landon, built everything from a rundown warehouse. 3 decades ago, he started with a single lathe and a small contract making gears for a farming equipment company. He turned that into a business worth over $28 million. He once told me, "I didn't pick you for your degree. I picked you because you could stand next to a press for 12 hours and still find it beautiful." As his health declined, I was tasked with running operations, keeping the line moving, the workflow tight, and people clear on their roles. I wasn't the speech-giving type. I wasn't flashy in meetings. I just made sure things worked. Everything shifted when Lily Landon, Alan's youngest daughter, came back from California after earning her MBA from Stanford and spending 2 years at a tech investment firm. She walked in wearing glossy heels, dropping buzzwords like digital transformation, lean management, and scalable growth models. None of it made the machines run better, but it got a few heads nodding in the boardroom. After 3 months of observation and evaluation, Lily officially took the reins when Alan retired due to heart issues. On the day of her appointment, Alan shook my hand and said only one thing. I told her to keep the core technical team intact. You're essential. 1 week later, I was called up to her new executive suite on the 5th floor, freshly painted, minimalist decor, and the sharp scent of unfamiliar perfume. She didn't say much, just slid a termination notice across the table. "The company needs bold changes," she said like she was quoting a magazine cover. "We believe in young, agile people who embrace transformation. They're our new foundation." I gave her a thin smile. Some things can't be learned from a textbook, just like some mistakes can't be fixed with a weekend workshop. I walked out of that office carrying a cardboard box that held nearly 2 decades of my life. A few old photos, a desk clock Alan gave me when I got promoted, and a model of an assembly line I once designed. Each step I took on that cold tile floor felt like punctuation for a new chapter, one Lily Landon could never predict. I once saw Alan Landon himself run out during a spring thunderstorm to cover a new CNC machine because, as he said, it's just been installed, still learning to breathe. To him, every machine had a soul. Every worker was family. He didn't preach values in meetings. He lived them. In all the years I worked under him, he never missed a crew meeting and never referred to anyone as head count. Maybe that's why I always called him Mr. Allen, even after I became VP. He never asked me to call him by name. He'd just put a hand on my shoulder and say, "You don't have to say much, Thomas. They watch you with their eyes." I remember the day he brought me into that glass-walled office by the shop floor where we usually held tech reviews. He handed me a blueprint for a new production line. "This is my bet on the future," he said, "but I need someone who knows how to keep it from falling apart over one loose bolt." He handed me the plan. No contract attached. Just a firm handshake. From that day on, I never watched the clock again. When my wife, Karen, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, I was in the middle of implementing a new distribution system across 3 lines. I was about to request some time off to take her for treatment in Pittsburgh, but the next morning there was a new schedule on my desk. My morning shifts reassigned, meetings moved online. I didn't need to ask. Mr. Allen had already taken care of it. He never mentioned it. When I went to thank him, he just waved me off. Family first, the factory comes second. If Karen needs anything, you call me, no formalities. Karen passed away 2 years later. She was the quiet light of my life, and her final months, painful as they were filled with love. Alan was the only non-family member at the funeral. He stood silently at the back, and when I walked out to my car, he placed a hand on my shoulder. That same steady gesture, and said, "When you're ready, come back. And if you never do, I understand." I returned after 3 weeks. I never thought I'd leave land and manufacturing. It wasn't just my job. It was the part of my life I'd chosen to build with both hands and unwavering loyalty. I knew the machines by sound, who had a sick kid at home, who was about to get a trade certificate. I knew I still mattered, until the day I heard Lily say, "We need young people." Coming from someone who'd never operated a shift in her life, it landed like a sucker punch to the chest. There's one detail I haven't mentioned. A few months before Alan retired, I had a bad feeling. He was quieter, often staring out at the shop floor instead of listening to updates. One late afternoon, he called me in, handed me an envelope. "If she ever pulls something foolish," he said, "this will keep you from living on canned soup in retirement." Inside was an addendum to my contract, signed by him, a clause guaranteeing 18 months of base salary if I was terminated without just cause. Not a CEO payout, but enough to not be forgotten. I laughed at the time. "You don't really think your daughter would screw up that bad?" He didn't laugh. "It's not about screwing up, Thomas. It's about people thinking they're smarter than experience." Now I understand. He knew. He saw it coming. And he trusted I would know what to do when the time came. I drove away from the company parking lot that evening, sunset slanting across my rearview mirror. The road ahead was the same one I'd taken 1,000 times, but that day it didn't lead home. It was headed somewhere unfamiliar. But I wasn't going empty-handed. I carried my dignity, my knowledge, and the faith a man named Alan Landon once placed on my shoulders. That wasn't something Lily could ever replace with a market analysis. I came home with a cardboard box and a mind that wouldn't quiet down. Karen's old cat jumped off the kitchen chair and nudged my hand, but I barely felt it over the steady thud in my chest, like each heartbeat was hammering something awake. I set the box down, opened the drawer, and pulled out an old yellow folder. Edges worn, but still whole. I never forgot where I kept it. Beneath the menu from the restaurant where Karen and I celebrated our 10th anniversary. Inside was the revised employment contract for my last promotion, along with the addendum Alan handed me that day. The ink still looked fresh. The special clause was on page 4, section 9B. In the event of termination without just cause, the employee shall receive severance equal to 18 months of base salary, calculated at the current rate at the time of termination. I sat down and marked the clause with a red pen, partly for clarity, partly because it felt like I was tracing a major artery, one that, if pressed just right, could come alive again. I pulled out my phone and called Pete Dawson. Pete wasn't just a lawyer, he was an old high school buddy from Toledo. After leaving a big law firm in Cincinnati, he started his own practice, focusing on labor and mid-sized business cases. "Thomas?" he answered after 3 rings. "It's time I handed you that contract we always joked I'd never have to use," I said, voice steady, eyes locked on the page. "Did she give you a reason for the termination?" Pete asked. "No paperwork, just one sentence. The company needs to move forward." I heard Pete exhale sharply through the line. "Good. No reason, no prior notice, no written warning. We've got a case." The next morning, I brought the original contract, a folder of internal emails, and a copy of my last 12 months' pay stubs to Pete's office. He read every line, muttering as he went, underlining key phrases. "This clause is airtight, signed by the CEO, head of HR, and most importantly, it wasn't removed during last year's internal restructuring." He looked up at me. "Thomas, she just shot herself in the foot. What's your base salary again?" "Miles 20 a year," I answered without hesitation. Pete opened his laptop and tapped his calculator fast. "So that's around 180, add legal fees and damage to reputation. I can push this past 200. I didn't say anything, just stared out the window at the midday sun falling across the rooftops. I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory, only the quiet weight of needing to defend the worth of a man who'd given his life to a place, now treating him like obsolete machinery. 2 days later, I got an email from Landon Manufacturing's legal department inviting me to a friendly offboarding discussion. The subject line sounded polite, but I knew exactly what it was. The first knock on the courtroom door. I forwarded the email to Pete. "We're going," he replied flatly. On the third floor of the office building, Lily was nowhere in sight. Instead, a young lawyer named Carter greeted us. Crisp suit, slicked hair, but eyes clearly nervous when Pete laid out the printed contract with Section 9B highlighted in red. The same way I used to circle math questions on high school exams. "We weren't informed about this clause," Carter said, his voice noticeably weaker, "and we're not sure it still applies after last year's corporate charter updates." Pete didn't even look up. He slid over the addendum, the one reaffirming the clause's validity, signed by the previous legal director. "It's still enforceable," Pete said slowly. "If your firm wants to challenge it, we'll see you in court." Carter froze, visibly sweating despite the steady air conditioning. I'll need to consult the executive team." Pete gave a dry chuckle. She should have read the contract before trying to look smart. We walked out as light spring rain began falling. I tilted my face upward, letting the cold drops hit my skin like they were washing away the months of being treated as a relic. I didn't like conflict, but some things, if not defended, would be buried forever under the dust of so-called restructuring. I didn't choose to leave Landon. They kicked me out. Carelessly. Arrogantly. And now they'd pay. Not just in cash, but in the cost of their disrespect. 3 days after our first meeting with Pete, I was sitting in the living room where Karen once hung all our family photos when my phone rang. The screen read, "Alan Landon." I hesitated, letting my finger hover as if not touching it could somehow undo the past. "Thomas," he said, voice raspy and tired. "I just heard. Can you tell me what the hell happened?" I swallowed hard. "You should ask Lily. Your daughter told me to my face. I didn't fit the company's new direction." Silence on the line. Then a long, weighted sigh. I told her to review the contracts. I warned her some positions were protected by legal terms. But I guess she thinks she's bulletproof. I didn't respond. No words were needed. Alan knew me better than that. He knew I wasn't the kind to stir trouble. And he knew exactly what Lily was trampling. Not just a piece of paper, but the very foundation of what he and men like me had built with sweat and time. "I handed her full control," Alan said, almost as if defending himself. "I thought she'd learn. She'd see the value in experience, but now?" He trailed off, maybe searching for the right words, maybe choking on the regret of handing a knife to someone who didn't know how to wield it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to say, I'm sorry, Thomas." I leaned back in the chair, eyes fixed on the ceiling. In all our years working together, Alan had never said those words to me. This time, I gave him only the truth in return. "We've filed. Pete already sent the formal notice. If your side wants to settle privately, you have 5 days to respond." Silence. Then, in a softer tone, "I'll talk to her, but I'm not sure I have any pull left." The call ended on a promise with no guarantees. But just 5 minutes later, a new message came from an unlisted number. "Internal meeting, Friday, 10 a.m., company legal office, be on time." I forwarded the message to Pete. One line, it begins. And on Friday, we arrived ahead of schedule. The office looked different. Glass walls replaced, a shiny new logo on the wall, but the chill in the air was still sharp like cold steel. Pete laid out the documents on the table. The contract, the termination letter, employment history, salary records. Everything prepared, every key clause underlined in red like an open indictment. Across from us sat a young man with neatly combed brown hair and a polished face, probably not even 30. With him were a legal assistant and, unsurprisingly, no Lily. She hadn't bothered to show. Pete began, steady and calm as ever. According to the contract, Clause 9B was verified by the then CEO. It was never amended during restructuring, terminating employment without written notice, no reason, no corrective process. That's a breach of agreement. The other side pushed back weakly. But the company is undergoing restructuring. Cuts were necessary. Pete looked the lawyer dead in the eye. Restructuring doesn't erase legal obligations, especially when your firm fired a group of employees over 50 years. 3 of them with over 15 years of service, none of whom received prior warnings. I glanced at Pete. That line wasn't a coincidence. It was true. I had spoken with Mark, head of engineering, and Linda, head of internal finance. Both were terminated within 48 hours of me. No clear reason. Linda, age 55, had earned Employee of the Year 4 years straight. Mark redesigned the heat control system 3 years ago, saving the company nearly $200,000 each quarter. Pete pulled out a list from his case. 7 names, 7 ages, 7 titles. All gone within a week. The young lawyer across from us was now visibly sweating. "We're demanding full compensation per the clause," Pete said. "If the company refuses, we'll file not just for breach of contract, but also for age-based discrimination." The opposing lawyer leaned back, pale as a sheet. He said nothing more. Pete snapped the folder shut and stood. "You have 3 days to respond officially." As we exited the building, the early spring wind carried a familiar metallic scent from the nearby factory. I paused, looking up at the wall where the founders' portraits once hung. Alan's picture was still there, but now partially obscured by the sleek new logo. Flat, soulless. I didn't look back. I didn't need to, because I knew the wind had shifted. And this time, I wasn't walking into the storm alone. Following Tuesday, I stepped into the 6th floor conference room. Floor-to-ceiling glass reflected the bustling streets of downtown Columbus. Bottled water lined the table. The projector was ready. The air was thick with tension. Pete walked beside me, his leather case heavy with the evidence and clauses we'd sharpened over the past few days. Lily sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, her eyes ice-cold like she was hosting a product launch. Beside her was Carter, the same young company lawyer, this time visibly on edge, glancing between documents and his watch. 2 legal aides typed quietly, capturing every word like court stenographers. Pete opened calmly as always. "We're here per your request to clarify the severance obligation under Clause 9B, signed on April 12, 2007 and reaffirmed in 2020 following internal restructuring." Lily gave a faint smile, but the irritation was clear. "Mr. Reed, I don't think you really want to take this to court. It'll cost time, money, and no one in the industry will see you the same way again." I looked her straight in the eye. "I don't need them to see me the old way, Lily. I just need justice. The right way." She tilted her head as if hearing something amusing. "The company has the right to restructure. That's how business works. If every decision gets blocked by outdated clauses, how can we grow?" Pete didn't look up from the paperwork. "You're calling a legally binding severance clause outdated? It was reaffirmed less than 3 years ago. And if you think firing a string of veteran employees with no process, no warning, is smart strategy, I suggest brushing up on federal laws regarding age discrimination." Carter cleared his throat, interrupting. "We're open to negotiating. 6 months' salary, paid in full, no lawsuit, full NDA." Pete closed the folder with a sharp snap. 18 months, no less. And there will be no NDA if your company continues to deny liability. We have grounds to sue, not just for breach of contract, but also for systemic termination of staff over 50, done in a tight time window. The room chilled, as if the AC had suddenly gone Arctic. Lily leaned back, narrowed her eyes. "You're not the first I've let go, Thomas. And you won't be the last. All of you think you're irreplaceable." "It's not me who thought that," I said calmly. "It was your father who said it." The conference room door opened. Alan Landon walked in. His hair had grayed dramatically in just a few months, face more weathered, but his eyes were sharp. Just like the last time we stood side by side at line 2. He didn't greet anyone, just pulled out a chair beside me and placed a folder stamped with the company seal on the table. "My daughter," he began slowly, has made several decisions recently without consulting the advisory board. I thought she needed space to prove herself. But I now see I was wrong. Lily flinched. Dad, this is internal. You're not in charge anymore. No, Alan said, voice colder than I'd ever heard it, but I still hold controlling shares as the sole legal representative. He turned the folder and slid it to Carter. I'm instructing the legal department to pay Thomas Reed in full under the terms of his contract. 18 months' salary paid within 10 business days. If not, I will personally authorize litigation to protect this company's integrity. No one spoke. Lily's face flushed, her voice shaky. You're destroying everything I'm trying to build. No, Alan shook his head. You're destroying what hundreds of people built with blood and sweat. I'm trying to stop you from burying it all. The room thickened, every sound seeming to vanish. Carter picked up the folder, gave a slight nod. We'll issue a formal response by week's end. As we exited the building, I didn't look back. Alan's words still echoed in my ears. You may not be the man they praise, but you'll be the one they remember. Pete gave my shoulder a pat. This isn't the whole war, my friend. But today, we made them step back. I nodded. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was deeper, like I'd just pulled something sacred back from the hands of people who only saw numbers. The severance check hit my account that Monday morning, just 3 days after the meeting. $180,000. More money than I'd ever seen at once. But when I saw that number glow quietly on the screen, I felt empty. Money couldn't buy back the years I poured into building those lines, training wave after wave of technicians and giving every last breath to a place that discarded me like a worn-out tool. And I knew I couldn't let it end like that. With a wire transfer and a pat on the back? That afternoon, I called Louis Tran, one of the longest-serving design engineers I'd ever worked with. He'd left Landon 2 days after I did. No notice, no goodbyes. Like me, he'd been replaced by a fresh out-of-college digital transformation specialist. Thomas? Louis picked up after 2 rings. I thought you'd gone fishing or something. I'm thinking of starting something new, I said. Not for revenge. To prove they were wrong. He was quiet for a beat, then chuckled softly. You looking for someone who knows high-pressure hydraulics? I'm looking for someone who knows the soul of every valve. I'm looking for you. A few hours later, I called Melissa Chen. Former head of quality control. She once caught a critical defect in a shipment to Canada, saving the company from a major lawsuit. She was forced out for not aligning with the innovation culture. After I explained, she asked just one question: when do we start? I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed capital, vision, and someone who listened. That person was Jacob Weller, owner of a chain of machining shops in North Columbus. He once offered to back a custom parts division I'd proposed at Landon, an idea Lily had shut down instantly. When I called Jacob, he didn't let me finish. Thank you. Thomas, I've been waiting for this call since last month. Space is ready, power's connected, lease is signed. I just need someone to turn it into something real. 3 weeks later, I stood inside Jacob's old warehouse, once a welding shop, now being converted into our first custom hydraulic manufacturing facility. The walls were chipped, the floor dusty, but to me it was sacred ground. I named the company Forgeline Systems because real value isn't born on spreadsheets, it's forged, where metal meets heat and people sweat to create something no one else can. Louis drew up the new production layout. Melissa built a precision quality system optimized for small batch, high-tolerance orders. We rehired Jason, a brilliant CNC programmer cut by Landon, and Sam, a skilled tech I'd personally trained 4 years ago. Each person who walked into the shop breathed in something they thought they'd never find again. Not the scent of grease, but the feeling of being needed. When the first machines rolled in, I sat alone in a makeshift plywood office, looking out the open window onto the floor. A large blueprint was spread across my desk. Our first order. A custom pressure control unit for an oil firm in Kansas. They used to work with Linden, until Lily slashed delivery timelines and quality tanked. Now they were back, not for a discount, but because they trusted the people behind the product. We were just beginning, but the gears were already turning, not for vengeance, for rebuilding value from the ashes. I no longer worked for a company. I was rebuilding a belief. And this time, no one would be able to cross my name off just because I didn't fit their new vision. Because Forgeline Systems wasn't built on a vision, it was built by the very hands they threw away. 3 months after I left Landon Manufacturing, I got a message from an unknown number near midnight. You should know, they just sold the next-gen hydraulic machining system, cheaper than the old models. No signature, no explanation. But I knew exactly who sent it. Olivia Burns, the last technical inspector left standing after the mass layoffs. I called her the next morning. Olivia spoke quickly, like she was afraid someone was listening. They liquidated nearly half the equipment from the custom division. Those new CNC machines you approved early last year, they're on the quick sale list now. Most of them are going for 30% of the original value. I gripped the phone tighter, eyes locked on the deployment plan for Forgeline's fourth order. Each of those machines had been a critical piece in helping us compete in the small but high-margin market Alan and I once targeted. The same market Lily once scoffed at, saying, "Nobody custom builds anymore, it's a cost sink." But that so-called cost sink was Landon's last real advantage against overseas manufacturers. "You have proof?" I asked. Olivia hesitated, then emailed me a photo, an internal equipment list stamped liquidation in red, with the sale contract date. The approving signature at the bottom, faint but unmistakable, L. Landon. I forwarded the email to Pete with a note. "She's not just breaking contracts, she's gutting company assets." Pete called back 10 minutes later. "You think she's stockpiling cash?" "I'm sure of it," I said. "Olivia says the equipment was sold to a third-party contractor in Miami. That's where Lily used to live and where she's been buying property." Pete hissed through his teeth. "Asset transfers across state lines. If Alan doesn't know, this is worse than I thought." The following week, I met Alan at a small diner on the south side of town, the same place he once took me to celebrate our first $2 million contract. He showed up late, moving slowly with a cane, his face thinner than the last time I'd seen him. "I feel like something's slipping out of my hands," he said, stirring his coffee while staring out the window. "Last time I was let into the plant was 3 weeks ago. Lily told me I should rest, said I should enjoy retirement. I didn't waste time. Did you know they sold the G2000 series CNC machines?" He froze. "No way. Those were installed less than 10 months ago. I signed off on them myself because your hydraulic designs were too good to delay." I handed him my phone, showing the photo and the transfer contract. His face went pale. "She said the company was pivoting, that she wanted to cut losses in underperforming units. I thought she was just tweaking the model." "She's gutting the company," I said bluntly, "slashing quality, selling off equipment, firing veterans, all to funnel money to Miami. I know of at least 3 condos being bought under a shell company, all in Lily's name." Alan leaned back, hands trembling around his coffee cup. For the first time in my life, I saw him look at me like he'd just watched his life's work drift toward the rocks. "Tomasis," I thought I could step back, let her prove herself, he said, voice cracking. But I didn't think she'd wreck it this fast. I didn't say anything. He needed that silence to face the pain he'd created himself. After a few moments, Alan looked up. His eyes were no longer misty. They had that same edge I remembered from the plant, steel catching the light. "Are you still in touch with the old team?" "I'm working with Louie, Melissa, Jason, Sam and Olivia are keeping an eye on things too. We're not standing still." Alan nodded slowly. "I can't save the company again, but I won't let her bury it. If she doesn't stop, I'll ask the board to reconsider the ownership structure." I looked at him. "You still hold majority shares, right?" 51%, he said. "Never gave up voting rights. Kept that much, just in case. Looks like today is that case." Driving away from the diner, my mind was racing. Lily thought she could control everything. People, property, memory, even her father's legacy. But some things can't be bought. Some foundations are built with hands and conscience, not money flowing through Florida, LLCs. And I, Thomas Reed, had laid the first brick for the day she'd have to face the truth. I was reviewing the pressure distribution blueprint for an order from Houston when my phone buzzed. Sender, Jennifer Wu. The message said just 4 words. You need to see this. Jennifer used to lead Landon's quality control lab, the last veteran still there after the entire core team was replaced. She hadn't stayed out of fear, but because she was 3 years from full pension. I once urged her to leave. Forge Line always had room, but she shook her head. I'm staying, not for me, but because someone has to know what's really happening. I opened the attachment. It was a Q2 internal production report. The numbers were brutal. Orders down 38%, return rate tripled, final product defect rate above 9%, the highest in company history. I replied, "What about customer feedback?" Jennifer sent a screenshot of the internal inbox. 3 emails from major accounts, once the backbone of Landon's revenue. They all said the same things: complaints about quality, delivery delays, and ultimately the decision to terminate the contracts. My eyes landed on the recipient, Lily Landon, and the last line from an email by Midwest Controls, a longtime client from Indiana, stopped me cold. We'll be seeking a partner with more understanding and commitment. Your production delays have severely impacted our operations. Midwest Controls. 3 months ago, they declined my pitch out of loyalty to their old supplier. Now, that loyalty had cracked. I immediately sent the message to Pete along with the entire batch of files Jennifer had forwarded. He replied within a minute. The breaking point is surfacing. 2 weeks later, I met Jennifer at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, far from where anyone from the old company would show up. She arrived with a worn shoulder bag and a determined look in her eyes. She's losing control, Thomas, Jennifer said, pulling out a thick folder. I printed this from the internal system. Production is understaffed. 2 lines had to halt temporarily because there were no certified engineers on duty. They replaced them with unqualified personnel. I flipped through the pages quickly. Detailed error reports, photos of defective products, even chat logs of engineering leads pleading for help from a design department that no longer had anyone capable of responding. Jennifer pointed to the R&D investment section, down by 70%. Meanwhile, executive management expenses had doubled. She's draining every dollar to keep up appearances. But appearances don't run machines, Thomas. I nodded. What about Alan? He still doesn't know everything? Jennifer gave a faint, bitter smile. I think he knows bits and pieces, but he doesn't have access to the updated reporting system. Lily locked him out after rumors surfaced that he might call a board meeting. I tightened my grip on the coffee mug. He knows she's about to be exposed. Jennifer pulled a small USB drive from her bag. Complete production data from the day Lily took over until now. Unedited financial reports, too. If you're going to make a move, this is enough. I took it as if holding a live fuse, but I knew this wasn't for destruction. It was for starting again with the truth. That night, Pete and I reviewed every single file. On the computer screen, a string of failures Lily had desperately tried to hide. Skyrocketing warranty claims, returned inventory piling up, and, most of all, new client acquisition sitting at near zero. Pete looked at me, eyes sharp with the thought I was already thinking. If you go public with this, she won't just lose her role. She'll lose face across the entire industry. I nodded silently. I'm not trying to ruin anyone. I just want to protect what still has value. Pete raised an eyebrow. You're rebuilding Forge Line and proving that they were wrong the day they kicked you to the curb. I glanced at the wall where our new facility layout hung framed. One side, Forge Line, where people and craftsmanship came first. The other, Landon, collapsing under pride and blind ambition. The truth doesn't need polish, it just needs light and the right moment. I knew that moment was near, when the board would have to sit down, when Alan would have to choose between loyalty to his daughter and the legacy he built with his own hands. And I, the man they once dismissed with a cold nod in the hallway, was walking back, quietly but with certainty, carrying what they no longer had: integrity, memory, and a devotion that can't be bought. That same night, I was updating the staffing chart for ForgeLine's second expansion phase when the phone rang. The name on the screen made me sit upright. Alan Landon. I answered, no greeting, just a heavy breath and a sentence that sounded like it had been rehearsed 1,000 times. Tamaris, I need you. I said nothing. He continued, voice cracking but still holding that familiar strength. I stepped too far back. I thought Lily deserved a chance, but now I see, if we don't act soon, everything I've built will be buried. I laid a hand on the desk, still marked with pencil lines from the first blueprint we ever sketched together. I won't beat around the bush, Alan went on. I've called for an emergency board meeting. They've agreed if I can show there's a viable leadership alternative, they'll consider restructuring the top. I want you there. Tomorrow night. My house. Bring anything you think needs presenting. I looked out the window, where the silhouette of our new shop glowed faintly in the dark. The same place where those once cast aside were rebuilding value with their bare hands. I once thought I'd never go back down that road. But this time I wasn't returning with my head down. I was coming back to salvage what hadn't yet been completely destroyed. I'll be there, I said simply. Alan exhaled like a weight had been lifted off his chest. Thank you, Thomas. If you can help me convince the board, we might still have a shot. The next evening, I arrived at Alan's old house on the west side of town, once the informal gathering spot for department heads and senior engineers. The lights in the living room glowed warmly. A small meeting table was set by the window with water, files, and 7 chairs. 6 for board members, 1 for Alan. I stepped in, unsurprised to see Louis already there. He nodded, more serious than usual. Melissa arrived minutes later, carrying a thick binder, a full performance comparison between ForgeLine and Landon over the last 6 months. When everyone was seated, Alan stood, eyes locking with each person in the room. I gave my daughter control because I believed she needed the opportunity to prove herself, he began. But I misjudged, not her ability, but her character. No one objected. Everyone had seen the consequences. The company didn't just lose contracts and machines, it lost its soul, he said, his voice hardening. And I believe there's only one way to restore it. Bring back the people who built it. He looked at me. Thomas? I stepped forward and opened my folder. On the small projector screen, I presented 4 charts. Landon's production decline, client attrition, rising negative feedback, and finally, ForgeLine's steady growth with the original team. We didn't replicate miracles, I said. We simply did what was right. We put engineering before so-called profit optimization. As a result, the clients who left Landon came to ForgeLine not for cheap prices, but because they believed we keep our word. I paused, locking eyes with the board. I'm not here to take anything back, but if you want to save this company, the first step is to take Lily's hands off the controls. A deep voice echoed from the corner of the table. William Dawes, the finance head from back when Alan still ran the place. If you come back, are you willing to collaborate? I am not coming back to be someone's subordinate, I replied. I propose a merger between ForgeLine and Landon, not an acquisition, but a strategic partnership. Retain the core technical team, cut the bureaucratic fat, and turn Landon into a premium production hub, like it used to be. All eyes turned to Alan. He nodded slowly. I support it. 1 hour later, the meeting ended. No shouting, no objections, just one thing remained. A silent consensus. The storm was coming, and they chose to stand together under one roof, rather than clutch Lily's shredded umbrella. As I stepped out the door, Alan called after me. Thomas, I won't apologize for the past, but I want to thank you for not closing the door on this place. I turned back. I'm not coming home, Alan. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage someone else left behind. Landon Manufacturer's quarterly meeting was held in the main hall, the same room that once echoed with cheers after each production milestone. Now it felt cold and tense, like the air before a spring thunderstorm. I walked in last with Alan and William Dawes. Executives and department heads turned to look at me as if they'd seen a ghost, the man they thought was gone forever. But the most dramatic reaction came from the center of the room. Lily Landon. She shot to her feet, voice sharp. "He has no right to be here." I didn't flinch. I quietly pulled out a chair beside Alan. He said nothing, just slid a red folder toward the board chair. Printed on the cover, Strategic Merger Proposal. The chair, Nora Ellis, a sharp-minded woman who once ran a regional food manufacturing chain, opened the folder, skimming through the graphs. The tension in the room was so thick you could hear each page turn. Lily hissed, "I'm the current CEO. All decisions fall under my authority." Alan looked up. His voice was raspy but firm. "No, you hold 20%. I still hold 51, and I've cast my vote to approve the merger between Landon Manufacturing and Forgeline Systems." Lily's face turned pale. She spun toward William. "You can't let this happen. This is a hostile takeover." William placed his hand on the table, calm as stone. "No one's taking over anything. This is a necessary alliance to salvage what's left." I stood, pulling out a restructuring plan. Forgeline didn't come to seize. We bring back the talent this company cast out, the systems it ignored, and, most importantly, the customers you lost. Lily laughed bitterly. "You think you can do better than me, with an outdated team and obsolete tech?" I met her eyes. "It's not what I think, it's what the customers think. They've already said it, with the contracts you let slip." Nora interrupted, placing the folder down. "We've reviewed it. Forgeline posted a 14% growth in just 6 months, with near zero product complaints. Meanwhile, Landon saw a 37% revenue drop and lost 4 major clients." Another board member, Mr. Ramirez, a supply chain veteran, nodded in agreement. "We need someone who knows manufacturing, not just how to make PowerPoint slides." Lily turned to Alan, desperation in her voice. "You're throwing me away for some old engineer?" Alan didn't blink. "No, I'm saving the company your grandfather built. And if you still don't understand that, then you were never meant to lead it." The room fell silent. Only the faint hum of the projector remained. I didn't look at Lily. I turned to the board. "I don't want a title. I want a chance to bring this company back on track. On one condition: a complete restructuring of the executive team, and we keep the people who actually make the product, not those chasing KPIs." Nora nodded. "Proposal approved." Lily quietly gathered her papers. As she passed me, she stopped and whispered, "You might win this time, but I'll be back." I simply said, "Next time, learn to respect the machines and the people before talking about vision." After the meeting, Alan and I stood by the window. He looked down at the old factory, once buzzing day and night, now echoing with the past. "Thank you, Thomas," he said softly, "for not turning away." I smiled faintly. "I didn't come back for revenge, Alan. I came to pick up the pieces others stepped on." And then, as the last light of day streamed through the tall glass panels, I knew the power play was over. Now it was time to begin again, with old hands, but a heart that had never quit. 1 year after the restructuring was officially announced, the new name, Forgeline Landon Hydraulics, appeared prominently at trade shows and in industry reports across the Midwest. The once unlikely partnership between experience and innovation had created something no one expected: one of the region's fastest, most precise, and flexible hydraulic systems producers. The old plant had been renovated into an in-house training center where veteran technicians mentored a new generation of engineers. Melissa led the quality division, Jason now headed CNC programming, and Lewis oversaw high-end product development. No one was replaced. No one was forgotten. I sat in my new office, a modest corner space looking directly over the assembly line. On the wall hung an old photo, Alan and me in front of Forgeline's first CNC machine, shaking hands. It wasn't flashy, but to me, it was a reminder that every solid beginning starts with trust and hands that don't give up. That afternoon, I was in a strategy meeting when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I knew it instantly. Lily's voice came through after a brief pause. I'm starting a production strategy consulting firm in Miami. A few investors are interested, but I need a technical partner to build credibility. And I thought you'd see the potential. I leaned back in my chair, watching the workers inspect each machine component. Every person out there was a reason. I couldn't forget what she had destroyed. I think the only thing I understand, I replied slowly, is that you haven't learned anything from what's happened. I didn't call to apologize, she said quickly. I called to give you a chance to partner. I let out a quiet laugh. A real opportunity is when you're on the factory floor, realizing how a part being off by a few thousandths of an inch can shut down an entire line. What you're offering is just a fresh coat of paint over the same old crash. I was about to end the call when another voice chimed in. Charles. Thomas? He said. I'm here. She called me this morning asking about investment. I told her if she wants to start something, come back here. Start from the bottom, the way I did, the way you did. I stayed silent, then nodded, as if he could see me through the phone. She needs to be told no, he continued. She needs to learn to build from the ground up, not take the elevator to the top floor and think she built the tower. Lily said nothing more. She hung up. Maybe, for the first time, she listened, not to argue, but to reflect. At the end of the year, we held a wrap-up gathering at the newly expanded plant in South Columbus. No stage, no confetti. Just a simple spread of sandwiches and hot coffee. But everyone's eyes sparkled, not because of bonuses, but because they knew the place they stood had meaning. Alan showed up late, leaning on his cane, wearing that same old brown coat. He stood beside me, watching the line run smoothly. You did what I once hoped my daughter would, he said. Not bring a company back, but keep its soul alive. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, slowly, some lessons cost you a career, Alan, but some values, when held firm, will always rise again, no matter how much wreckage they're buried under. He smiled, a quiet smile full of peace. I turned and looked at the whole team. Faces once labeled outdated, no longer relevant. Now, they were the foundation of something growing faster than any forecast predicted. Forge Lane Land and Hydraulics wasn't just a company. It was living proof of a simple truth. Experience doesn't expire. Integrity isn't replaceable, and real value, even when dismissed or forgotten, always finds its way back. Thomas's story is a clear reminder that honesty, experience, and dedication are never out of date, in any industry. In an age obsessed with technology and new thinking, core values are often overlooked, until the system falls apart. Thomas didn't seek revenge, he rebuilt the right way, and that's how real leaders make lasting change. What do you think about Thomas's journey and the choices he made? Would you have done the same? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life and family.